The gymnasium at the University of Southern California did not look like the kind of place where a man's understanding of himself would be permanently revised. It was November of 1992, and the practice floor smelled of rubber and old sweat, and the particular stillness that settles over a large room when the work inside it has stopped. There were 41 people in that building. 40 of them were watching. One of them was about to learn something that no classroom in that university had ever taught. Shaquille O'Neal was 20 years old that autumn. He stood 7 feet 1 inch in bare feet and weighed 301 pounds, without a single ounce of that weight being accidental. He had arrived at LSU 2 years earlier as the most anticipated freshman in college basketball history, and had proceeded to justify every syllable of that anticipation. He averaged 27 points and 14 rebounds in his sophomore season. He had hands large enough to palm a regulation basketball with the same casual ease that most men pick up a grapefruit. His vertical leap had been measured, twice at 32 inches. He was not merely large, he was large the way certain geological formations are large, with a quality of permanence as though the earth had simply decided to put more of itself in one place. The men in that gymnasium that morning knew all of this. They had seen the magazine covers, they had watched the games. When Shaquille O'Neal walked through a door, every person in the room knew it before they turned around, because the air in the room changed. In 11 seconds, the largest man in that gymnasium would go very still. Nobody standing on that practice floor understood what they were about to see, not the assistant coaches pressed against the far wall, not the 2 journalists seated on the lowest bleacher step with their notebooks open, not the 6 members of the martial arts demonstration team who had arrived that morning at the specific invitation of a man none of them had yet recognized. They would spend the next 3 decades trying to describe what happened in those 11 seconds, and not one account would agree on the details. Because the details moved faster than the human eye was designed to track. The man who made those 11 seconds possible was sitting in the 4th row of the bleachers when Shaquille O'Neal walked in. He was wearing a gray cotton work shirt, the kind sold at hardware stores, with the top button open. He had on dark denim jeans and a pair of plain leather boots with no heel worth mentioning. He was 52 years old. He was 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 173 pounds. He had a beard going silver at the edges and a cap he had pulled low enough that his eyes were in shadow. If you had passed him on a street, you would have placed him as a retired contractor, or a man who taught shop class at a rural high school, or perhaps a grandfather who had driven a long way to watch his grandchildren play. You would not have looked twice. His name was Carlos Ray Norris. He had been answering to Chuck since before Shaquille O'Neal's parents had met each other. He had earned his black belt in Tang Soo Do in 1960, in Korea, while serving as an airman in the United States Air Force. He had earned a 2nd in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a 3rd in Judo, and ranks in half a dozen systems that most martial artists in that gymnasium could not have named correctly. He had won the professional middleweight karate championship 6 consecutive times between 1968 and 1974, a stretch of dominance so complete that the division had eventually restructured itself around the question of who might someday beat him. He had trained with Bruce Lee. He had trained Bruce Lee. He had spent 11 years perfecting a single spinning back kick that competition judges stopped bothering to score separately because it arrived before the point call finished leaving their mouths. He was sitting in the 4th row of the bleachers with his cap low and his hands resting on his knees, and Shaquille O'Neal did not know he was there. The morning had been arranged as a fundraising event for a youth athletics program affiliated with the university. The martial arts team was scheduled to give a 30-minute demonstration. Shaquille O'Neal had agreed to make an appearance, shake hands, say a few words to the cameras, and return to his schedule. He had arrived 20 minutes early and was walking the perimeter of the floor in the specific way of very large men in athletic spaces, assessing the room the way a man assesses any room he has always been the largest person in. He stopped near the demonstration team's equipment cases and looked at the group of men stretching near the baseline. He watched them for approximately 45 seconds. Then he said something to the man standing closest to him, a broad-shouldered trainer named Marcus Webb, who had been working with the USC athletics program program for 11 years. What O'Neill said was not quiet. The gymnasium's acoustics were designed to carry sound. Everyone on that floor heard the words. And the words were these, that the people stretching near the baseline were small, and he did not understand why small people spent so much time learning to fight, when size was the only thing that ever mattered when it came down to it. He said he had been in situations, real situations, not gymnasiums, and in his experience a man who weighed 300 pounds was a finished argument. He said that with genuine goodwill, the way a man states what he considers to be an obvious fact. He was smiling when he said it. Marcus Webb nodded slowly. He did not agree. He was also looking at the fourth row of the bleachers. The man in the gray cotton shirt had not moved. If you are watching this, and you have not yet subscribed to this channel, this is the moment to do it. Hit subscribe now and drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from. Because what happened next in that gymnasium in November of 1992 is the reason this story has been told in dojos across 4 continents for 30 years. And you do not want the next part of it to reach you secondhand. Marcus Webb said something to one of the demonstration team coordinators. The coordinator walked to the bleachers. He climbed to the 4th row. The conversation that followed lasted approximately 90 seconds. Then the man in the gray cotton shirt stood up. He stood without hurry. He did not stretch. He did not roll his neck. He did not bounce on the balls of his feet, or shake out his arms, or perform any of the preparatory rituals that athletes use to signal to a room that something is about to begin. He simply stood, removed his cap, folded it once along the brim, and set it on the bleacher seat beside him. Then he walked down to the floor. He walked the way water finds the lowest point of a landscape, without urgency, without announcement, following a route that seemed less chosen than inevitable. The demonstration team saw him first. The change moved through them the way a change in wind direction moves across open water. Not a sound, not a word, but a visible shift in orientation, each man turning toward the source of it in turn. 2 of the assistant coaches recognized him next. One of them set down his clipboard on the scoring table with a deliberate, careful motion, as though he did not want to make any sudden movements. The journalist on the bottom bleacher step looked up from his notebook and did not look back down again. The recognition wave crossed the floor in a direction away from Shaquille O'Neal, which meant that by the time it reached him, every other person in the gymnasium already knew. He has already lost. He just does not know it yet. O'Neal watched the man in the gray shirt approach, and his expression carried the specific quality of polite attention that very large people sometimes wear when someone considerably smaller than them enters their immediate space. Not dismissive, not unkind, but calibrated by a lifetime of being the reference point in every room he had ever entered. He extended his hand. The handshake made the size differential concrete. O'Neal's hand was 12 inches across the palm. The other man's hand disappeared inside it. Chuck Norris did not appear to notice. One of the assistant coaches, a judo practitioner of 20 years named Daniel Reyes, would later describe the quality of what happened next as a particular kind of silence. Not the silence of an empty room, he said. The specific silence of a room where everyone has simultaneously decided to stop using the air. O'Neal said it directly. He said he meant no disrespect, but he had said what he said and he believed it, and he was curious whether the man in front of him disagreed. He asked the question with genuine openness. He was not posturing. He was not performing. He was a 20-year-old who had never yet encountered the specific kind of education that awaited him, and who therefore had no way to understand that it was already in the room with him. Chuck Norris looked at him for a moment. The look was not hard. It was not cold. It carried the quality of a man examining a proposition he has considered before and found interesting in the same way that certain old questions are always interesting, not because they are unresolved but because the people asking them deserve the full answer, rather than a shortcut to it. He said, "Show me what size does." Daniel Reyes would remember those 4 words for the rest of his life. What followed was not a competition in the formal sense. There was no referee, no ring, no signal to begin. There was simply a conversation about distance that lasted 11 seconds and involved on one side 301 pounds of trained athleticism, and on the other side, the accumulated weight of 32 years of practice in the specific mathematics of human conflict. A fight is not two bodies making contact. A fight is a problem of geometry. Every skilled practitioner of every serious martial system in the world arrives, through whatever language and tradition their art uses, at the same central discovery, that the man who controls the distance between two bodies controls the outcome of any encounter before it begins. Distance is not the space between fighters. Distance is the decision about what is possible. A man who does not understand distance does not understand why he lost until long after he has already lost. Shaquille O'Neal understood leverage. He understood mass and reach, and the specific advantages conferred by a body that occupied more of the world than other bodies. What he did not yet understand was that these advantages exist at specific distances, and that a man who knows what he is doing will never allow the distance to be set by his opponent. Second 1. O'Neal reached forward with his right hand, an open palm motion, not a strike, a gesture, the kind of casual demonstration of scale that a large person makes when they want to establish physical context. The hand covered a significant portion of the visible air between the two men. It arrived at a location that 1 second earlier had contained Chuck Norris's left shoulder. Chuck Norris was no longer there. The movement was not athletic in the showy sense. It was not a leap or a spin or a sudden explosive burst. It was a step. A single measured step to the outside of the reaching arm, covering perhaps 18 inches of lateral ground, executed with a timing so precise it required the reaching hand to pass through air that had never been occupied by anything it was meant to reach. The journalist with the notebook, his name was Paul Trent, he had been assigned to cover the fundraising event for a regional sports publication, and had expected to spend 40 minutes and file 800 words, later said that he experienced a physical sensation he had never felt at a sporting event, the conviction that he was watching something he would not be able to accurately describe. Happening in real time, right in front of him, Daniel Reyes, from his position against the far wall, had both hands flat on the scoring table. Second 2, O'Neal adjusted. This was the important thing about Shaquille O'Neal at 20 years old. He was not slow. A man who can move 301 pounds with the fluency that he moved 301 pounds was not operating on ordinary athletic terms. He recovered from the first attempt with a speed that would have been decisive against any reasonable opponent, and pivoted to re-establish his position. His second motion was a downward press with his left hand, aimed at the shoulder. The kind of controlling grip that any man with his physical architecture could use to anchor an opponent in place. It found nothing. Chuck Norris had moved again, not away. Forward and to the inside past the outer edge of the reaching arm, into a position that placed him inside O'Neal's reach at a distance of approximately 14 inches. Which is not a distance where a man who is 7 feet tall and built for external leverage has any particular advantage. It is, in fact, one of the worst possible distances for a large man to find himself in when the person inside that distance knows what to do there. The boom operator for a television crew that had arrived to film the fundraising appearance had stopped moving. He was holding a pole microphone horizontal at his waist. He had not moved for 2 seconds. Second 3. Chuck Norris placed his right hand against O'Neal's sternum, not a push, not a strike, a placement, the kind of contact a physician makes when he is listening for something specific. The touch lasted perhaps half a second. In that half second, Shaquille O'Neal felt something he had never felt before in any athletic context, which was the sensation of his own size becoming irrelevant. He would describe it, years later, as feeling a pressure that was not proportional to what produced it. The man in front of him weighed 173 pounds, and was not exerting what felt like 173 pounds of force. He was exerting something that operated on a different register, organized force, directed force, force that arrived at a specific location inside his balance, and made a request of his body that his body, before his mind could intervene, began to honor. Second 4 and 5. O'Neal's third motion was his most committed. He understood by this point that casual reach was insufficient, and he brought his full frame to bear. A lowering of the center of mass, a forward drive from the hips. The kind of movement that in a basketball context produces contact that opposing players spend entire careers learning to absorb without fouling. Against most things in the world, This motion is a finished conversation. He drove forward and met, instead of resistance in the place he expected it, a specific absence. Chuck Norris was not where the drive was aimed. He had stepped not back but to the side and slightly behind, and his right hand had found the back of O'Neill's left shoulder at precisely the moment that O'Neill's forward momentum had committed itself fully. And what the hand did there was nothing more violent than a redirection, a small adjustment to the angle of travel, the kind of correction a river makes when it encounters a new slope. Shaquille O'Neal went to one knee. He did not fall. That distinction matters. A man of his physical quality does not fall from 11 seconds of engagement with a man half his weight. He went to one knee because the geometry of the encounter had placed him in a position where one knee was the most structurally sound response his body could produce to the specific problem of balance it had been presented with. He was there for approximately 3 seconds. His left hand touched the floor once. Daniel Reyes, against the far wall, exhaled for the first time in 11 seconds. He said afterward that he did not know he had been holding his breath. Paul Trent, on the bottom bleacher step, was writing in his notebook with movements he could not account for later. He had not made a conscious decision to write. His hand had simply begun. The boom operator had lowered the microphone to the floor. Chuck Norris stood and waited. He did not step back to create a demonstration distance between them. He did not raise his hands in any gesture of completion. He stood at the same 14 inches and he waited. And his breathing was unchanged from the breathing of a man who has been sitting in bleachers watching other people stretch. And this, more than any of the preceding 11 seconds, was what stayed with every witness in that gymnasium for the rest of their lives. Shaquille O'Neal rose from one knee with the specific unhurried quality of a man who is processing something while his body does something else. He straightened to his full height. He looked at the man in front of him. What he did not do was look for an explanation. He did not look around the room. He did not make the face of a man searching for external causes. He stood at his full 7 feet 1 inch, and he looked directly at the man in the gray cotton shirt, and his expression had changed from what it had been 11 seconds earlier, in a way that every witness in the gymnasium could see, and that none of them could fully describe. Chuck Norris reached up a considerable distance, given the geometry of the situation, and placed his hand once on O'Neill's left shoulder. His hand rested there for perhaps 2 seconds. Then he said something. He said it quietly enough that the closest witness, Marcus Webb, who was standing 8 feet away, caught only fragments of it. What Webb heard was this: that size is the first chapter of the story, and not the last chapter, and that a man who knows only his first chapter has not yet finished writing himself. That was all. He retrieved his cap from the 4th row of bleachers. He folded it once along the brim. He put it on. He walked to the gymnasium exit without looking back, with the same quality of movement, unhurried, inevitable, following a route less chosen than established, that he had brought with him when he walked in. At the door, one of the demonstration team coordinators, a man named Gerard Moss, who held a 3rd-degree black belt in Hapkido and had been training for 19 years, reached out as Norris passed and touched him once on the upper arm. Just once. The way a man confirms that what he has witnessed was real, and not a produced by some trick of perspective or collective attention. Chuck Norris nodded and walked through the door. Shaquille O'Neal stood on the practice floor for a moment longer. The room was very quiet. Then he asked, to no one in particular, who that man was. The question was not rhetorical. He genuinely wanted to know. Marcus Webb told him. The story traveled the way these stories travel, not through newspapers first but through practitioners, through the specific underground of people who train seriously, and who know that the most important events in their world rarely make the sports page. Gerard Moss told 3 people at his home dojo in Pasadena within a week. Those 3 people told others. Daniel Reyes included an account in a letter to a judo colleague in Vancouver, who trained with people who had been in the room for things Chuck Norris had done a decade before in tournament settings, and the letter was read aloud and then passed to others and then passed further still. Paul Trent filed his piece not as the soft fundraising feature he had been assigned but as something longer and harder to categorize, and his editor cut the most important parts out, which is why the version that circulated through the martial arts community in the years following bore no resemblance to the version that appeared in print. The account changed in transmission, as accounts always change. In some versions it was not 11 seconds but 30. In some versions Shaquille O'Neal fell completely. In some versions there were words that no witness could confirm were spoken. This is the nature of stories that matter. The specific facts mutate while the essential truth of the story remains intact. Because the essential truth is not about the specific facts, it is about what the specific facts demonstrated, which is a thing that does not change regardless of what the elapsed time or the exact wording was. Shaquille O'Neal went on to become the most dominant physical presence in the history of professional basketball. He won 4 championships. He was named the league's most valuable player. He built a public persona around exactly the qualities of size and force and unambiguous dominance that had walked him through the door of that gymnasium in November of 1992, with the confidence of a man who has never been seriously questioned by the world. This is not a contradiction. This is a man who encountered one specific question that revised one specific assumption and then carried both things forward, the confidence he came in with and the understanding he did not come in with. There is a version of that morning that Chuck Norris himself has never told publicly. He has not spoken in interviews about that gymnasium or that year or that particular Tuesday in November. The story exists only in the accounts of people who were in the room, which means it exists in the specific distortions and clarities that first-hand witnesses always produce. What seems consistent across every account, from Webb to Reyes to Trent to Moss, is the detail about the hand on the shoulder and the words that were spoken quietly at close range.
And the quality of the silence that followed them. A man does not change in 11 seconds. That is not what happens. What happens in 11 seconds, when the 11 seconds are the right 11 seconds, is that a man's understanding of what he does not yet know is permanently expanded. Shaquille O'Neal did not become a martial artist.
He became something more specific and more difficult, a man who knows the dimensions of the room he has not yet entered. Chuck Norris walked out of that gymnasium in November of 1992 with his cap on, and his shirt buttoned the same way it had been buttoned when he arrived, and returned to whatever the rest of his Tuesday required. He did not tell the story, he did not arrange for it to be told. He left the room, and the room kept the story, and the story went where stories go when the room cannot hold them anymore. The lesson written into that morning is not a complicated one. It is the oldest lesson in every serious tradition of physical practice, and it is this: the most dangerous assumption a man can make is that the room has already given him the most important information it contains. Size is information, speed is information, record and reputation and credential are information. But the man who has stopped looking for information he does not yet have has stopped learning, and a man who has stopped learning is a man who can be surprised by 11 seconds in a gymnasium in November, when he was certain he already understood everything a room like that could teach. Next week, we are going to tell the story of what happened in a hotel corridor in Las Vegas in March of 1979, when a former heavyweight contender made a remark about Tang Soo Do within earshot of someone who had spent 19 years learning precisely what that art could do in a corridor. That is the next episode. Do not miss it. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check resp.